3200.
8:07 AM 560 traffic center time. In for Jim today. Here's Eddie Manzano.
Inbound Edens, Lake Hook to the junction at 24 minutes on the outbound 40, heavy from the junction to Lake. Slow from Dundee to the spur. Inbound Kennedy, heavy from Canfield into the junction. O'Hare to downtown, an hour and 3 from the junction, 38. Express lanes at 32 on the outbound to O'Hare from downtown, 55. Heavy from Division to Canfield. Inbound Ike, stop and go from Manheim into the Circle. Thorndale to the post office, an hour and 6. Outbound 50. Heavy from Central to 25th Avenue. Inbound Stevenson, brake lights from Veterans Parkway to Kedzie. 55 to Lakeshore Drive, an hour and 20 from the Tri-State 50. Outbound 235 from Lakeshore Drive at 50, heavy from First to the Tri-State. Inbound Dan Ryan, 95th to downtown, 34, heavy from the Stevenson. Inbound Bishop Ford, solid from the Stony Island feeder to the Dan Ryan, 80, 94 to Dan Ryan at 45. Outbound at 15. On AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Breezy with a shower early this morning, then some sun by the afternoon, high 67. Partly cloudy, cooler tonight, low 48. Sun and clouds tomorrow, the high near 58. Clouds and a bit of rain on Saturday, the high 61. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Currently 61 in clouds. Next news 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Watch today's show live right now on the Income Store live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Amy, you mentioned end of last hour you're going to go see Joker with your boys this weekend.
Yeah, and got a little pushback from someone.
Saying
it's a safety issue.
Right. Well, I mean, it's sort of a remarkable thing. I mean, you've literally had the United States Army warn about Joker. You've got some movie theater chains that are adding security because it could be a trigger for, I don't know, an incel to who's marginally attached to reality and violent tendencies to go shoot up a movie theater, Aurora, Colorado style or something. Yeah. I mean, and I'm not making light of it, but it's just sort of a remarkable moment. The United States Army intervening in discussions about the release of a film in America.
Well, and NYPD is deploying undercover officers to sit in on the film. There's beefed up security in Los Angeles and here in Chicago.
Is this the first film about a deranged killer?
I mean, that's the premise of a lot of movies that I've seen my entire life.
The first expression of violence on the silver screen. And again, I haven't seen it yet, but Joaquin Phoenix has given some interviews. Some of them have become a bit testy, and I understand why. They'd be a bit testy for me too.
They wanted to yank the movie.
Well,
some people did.
Well, some people are advocating, yes, not to distribute it, and some people that are otherwise very sympathetic, like the families of Sandy Hook victims. But because you're sympathetic because something terrible happened to you, and we can all empathize with that, doesn't mean we should suspend the First Amendment, for example. But it's troubling that Joaquin Phoenix is sort of, and Todd Phillips, the director, who, by the way, have been interestingly critical of the left and the sort of outrage condemnation culture. But they have to defend this movie in context of sort of the hyper-politicized discussions on guns and the like. It's almost like Bryan Cranston having to defend playing a man in a wheelchair because he's not really in a wheelchair.
I mean, they went after him for that too.
It's getting all a bit silly, isn't it? Joaquin Phoenix on Joker.
I don't think it's the responsibility of a filmmaker to teach the audience morality or the difference between right or wrong. I mean, to me, I think that's obvious. I think if you have somebody that has that level of emotional disturbance, I think that they can find fuel anywhere. And so I just don't think that you can function that way. I mean, the truth is, you don't know what is going to be the fuel for somebody, and it might very well be your question. It might be this moment, right? But you can't function in life saying, well, I can't ask that question for the small chance that somebody might be affected by that question, right? I wouldn't ask you to do that, right? I wouldn't ask you to censor yourself.
This just in, we shouldn't look to Hollywood for moral instruction. What a revelation. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Maureen Callahan. She's a writer and editor for the New York Post, author of the New York Times bestseller, American Predator, The Hunt for the Most Meticulous Serial Killer of the 21st Century. And she had a good piece in the Post about the depressing echo chamber that is Hollywood these days. Maureen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
What do you think about all of the controversy swirling around Joker and the Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips sort of being endlessly pilloried about the potential dangerous nature, the dangerous nature of the film in terms of what somebody could do if they go see it?
It's so interesting because it feels like two distinct phenomena are colliding in the culture right now. You have Hollywood reflecting and refracting, I think, our own collective anxieties about multiple things. That was the sort of focus of the last column I wrote, that Hollywood has become sort of joyless. And then secondly, you have, we are not that far out from 1 week in America that saw 3 random mass shootings. 3. And I think were it not for that hyper alert state that we're in, where, it's not if but when the next mass shooting occurs, that Joker is sort of, being released into this climate. I think that's the reason. That's why you see, as you guys were talking about just now, the United States Army issuing a memo. It's unfortunate, but it's a very real collective anxiety we're feeling.
Well, is there some intel that they have that there's somebody's planning a shooting at the screening of the Joker?
I don't know that. I mean, I do know that they do monitor those corners of the web where the so-called incels will gather and talk and encourage each other. And a film like this, one of the things I do wish that Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix would talk about, because it is relevant, is, Joaquin is not the first person to play the Joker as a psychopath. Heath Ledger really was the one to sort of mainline that psychopathy in such a brilliant way. But this iteration of the Joker is again like entering the culture at a moment where he seems like this version could be something of a clarion call to the incel community. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, and I'm sure not one either really anticipated when they began working on the film, but unfortunately it is where we are. Can you blame a film for or any piece of art for such heinous violence? Of course not. But can you acknowledge the likelihood that one or more troubled individuals might find something in it? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, it's a fair question, but it's a question that is unevenly asked. For example, I didn't hear it being asked about Snoop Dogg's video in which Trump is assassinated. I didn't hear it being asked about Childish Gambino's video where people are violently killed, gunfire sprayed. I didn't hear it asked about Madonna's idiotic video trying to stay relevant, doing the same thing, a nightclub shooting a la Pulse in Orlando. So I didn't hear it asked in those instances of art, and I hear it asked in this instance. It's curious to me.
Well, it's interesting. I would definitely push back a little on Childish Gambino, because that to me was an artistic commentary on such gun violence happening even in places of worship, and the culture taking a beat and the nation taking a beat, our leaders taking a beat, and then shrugging and walking away. And it's going to happen again.
Well, I understand, but I mean, remember, we're talking here in the context of the joke, how somebody could receive the film. It doesn't matter what the intended commentary was, and this is the other disturbing part of the conversation. It's how somebody could receive it, because the way the Joker's been characterized has been rejected by Todd Phillips. That's not what we were attempting to convey. Some of the criticisms, including from the Sandy Hook parents, that's not what the character development, that's not what we had in mind with the character development here. But if somebody perceives it that way and does something, regardless of the accuracy of that perception, then somehow we're supposed to call into question whether this expression should be allowed.
Well, I think the issue with that response is that it seems at best evasive. I mean, the fact is that this iteration of the Joker is portrayed as a loner, as a societal reject, as a career failure, as someone whose anger at failing begins to manifest itself in random societal violence. And so I think that for him to sort of reject the hypothesis, to paraphrase Quentin Tarantino this very summer, that it's evasive at best. Yeah, I think that's fair.
You also wrote in your article that was published in the New York Post titled "Why Hollywood Has Become a Joyless, Depressing Echo Chamber" about Demi Moore. And I don't know if you saw her interview on Good Morning America with Diane Sawyer. It was painful to watch how she admitted,
Diane Sawyer interviews are painful.
No, it was just, how she was raped at age 15 and her mom sold her off for $500.
It was truly terrible. Truly terrible. You know, it's interesting with her memoir. It sort of fell into a piece of a lot of stuff that is coming out of Hollywood at the moment, and to no way minimize what she went through, which is unimaginable. But it's also easy to forget, as Demi Moore was sort of doing the rounds publicizing her book. And she's doing the rounds of major talk shows, basically parceling out parts of her life, you know, for consumption that have to do with her marriage to a younger man, you know, dissolving in threesomes and a miscarriage and losing control of her sobriety and all of these things. And it struck me that it's so easy to forget that this was once the highest paid actress on the planet. Yeah. You know, she broke so many barriers for women in Hollywood. She was once the most powerful actress in Hollywood. And there seemed to be no acknowledgement of that. It just seemed to be the terrible parts of her life that she was highlighting for promotion for her memoir, and it struck me as distinctly odd. It maybe more so for us than for her. Is that what people want?
Well,
is that what we want now?
Well, I mean, so speaking of the culture, you described some of the joylessness of Hollywood, and you contrast it from like the Robert Evans era. You mentioned reading his memoir, "The Kid Stays in the Picture," which was great, and the HBO film that was made into is good too. But as sort of celebratory and you know, acknowledging of excesses and so forth, but celebratory of life, it seems to me one aspect of the culture now is celebration of victimhood. And so if you don't have an angle towards victimhood where we can all sort of empathize with you and identify with you, we're a victim, but Demi Moore's a victim too. And I'm not minimizing what happened to her, but I'm just talking about culture generally. Victimization is celebrated, success isn't.
There is definitely a strain of that happening right now. I mean, even in putting aside the trauma she went through as a teenager, you know, when she was talking about all of these horrible things that happened to her as an adult, you know, her marriage to Bruce Willis failing, her marriage to Ashton Kutcher failing, et cetera, the framing was all these things happened to me. There was a distinct lack of agency.
Yeah.
You know, and that struck me as again, really, really odd. How do you go from, you do not get to be the highest paid actress in the world because you lack moxie, because you lack willpower and the ability to stand up for yourself in a room and say, no, I deserve this. And this was at a time when, for women to do that, and